What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. I hope everyone's doing well, getting ready for the start of this new NBA season. I know I can't wait. In this video, I'm going to be giving my preseason contender rankings. This is just based on what teams are looking like on paper and my general vibes about them heading into the season. Again, these are preseason rankings, subject to change, will almost 1000% change over the course of the 82. Also, this isn't really about standings, so my rankings don't correlate to win totals because some teams are just better equipped for the regular season than others. This is how I feel about the teams with everything involved, regular season, playoffs, whole thing in the context of winning a championship. I'm going to do my best to go through each team at a good pace because I don't want this video to be super long. If anything, the conversation can continue in the comments. Quickly, I do want to address one thing about last video. Too loud. It was way too loud. I'm gonna be better on that front. Sorry, didn't have headphones in. Amateur hour. All right, I'm gonna start with my number 1 and work my way down to my number 10 because I just think that's more interesting. In my number 1 spot, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder, the reigning champs. This team is still super young and likely to get after it during the regular season. Maybe not 68 wins, but probably still 60 plus. The possibility for a championship hangover is always going to be there, but I definitely think this team is uniquely equipped to get over that. SGA is likely going to be the same player, but I am curious to see if he shoots it as well from 3 or regresses back to the mid-30s in percentage. That is where he's been most of his career, and this past season he was shooting in the low 30s till about January, and then it shot up to well over 40% after that. It did regress back down to about 28% during the playoffs, but obviously, it did not stop them from winning the championship. And honestly, SGA becoming a high-volume, efficient three-point shooter is really what would put him on a whole nother level offensively. J-Dub and Chet are still trending upwards, which means they're going to get better, and this team could be even better, not just at the same level they were. And if Chet plays more than 32 games like he did last season, they really could go out and win 70 games. Other than that, I'm not really looking forward to anything new with this team, except Nikola Topic. It'll be interesting to see how he factors into all of this. He's their rookie from last year that did not play, and he's a pretty interesting offensive player. I'm not expecting him to be a difference maker or anything like that, but what will his minutes look like? In my number 2 spot, I have the Denver Nuggets. This team has consistently had one of, if not the best starting 5 in the league. Nikola Jokic obviously gives them that best player in the world factor. Jamal Murray is very consistently the same player, especially in the regular season. I'm curious to see if one of these days he decides to want to go out and try to get his first All-Star nod, but regardless, it won't change much. This roster has seen a ton of upgrades though. Cam Johnson over MPJ as the starting small forward. Tim Hardaway Jr. bringing that offensive punch off the bench. Bruce Brown returning. He's a really nice two-way connective piece. And then there's added center depth. You have Jonas Valanciunas, De'Ron Holmes. Look, I'm not going to gas these guys up, but it's going to really help this team not get as exhausted as they've been the past few seasons, running really limited lineups in the playoffs, and a lot of it being on Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and Aaron Gordon. And when we look back at this team last season, they still took Oklahoma City to 7 games while banged up, while exhausted. So I really hope we get that best version out of them, particularly in the playoffs. And outside of that, not that I think this team's ceiling is really dependent on it, but a Peyton Watson leap could be really the icing on the cake. He's already a fantastic defensive player, but he needs to improve that ball handling, the playmaking, the shooting efficiency. I would love to see him shoot another 3 or so a game. He's currently at about 2 attempts. In my number 3 spot, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is probably the best team in the East on paper. They have great depth, versatility, definitely the highest two-way ceiling out of any team in the East. Over the offseason, they did lose Ty Jerome, but still have Max Strus, DeAndre Hunter, who they'll have for a full season this time, and Dean Wade, the real D Wade. Additionally, they went out and signed Alonzo Ball, who I like the defense of, the passing of, and the three-point shooting of, if he can get that back to where it was. And then this team still has its star guard and center duos. I think we can expect an All-NBA level from Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley, a fringe All-NBA level from Darius Garland, maybe he even gets the nod in the end, and maybe even a fringe All-Star level from Jared Allen. This team just has a lot of star talent. In my 4th spot, I have the Houston Rockets. This team took a leap into the contender category over the offseason, which also, this is probably the last team I would consider to be in the upper tier of contenders, where if they went out and won it all, I wouldn't really be that surprised, and I don't think it would take many things falling their way in order for that to happen. Now, a lot of this is contingent on how much the Fred VanVleet injury affects this team's half-court offense, especially in the playoffs. Is Reed Sheppard going to be ready for a starting point guard role? Can he table set for this team and just be the professional ball handler out there for them? I worry about the general strain on Kevin Durant to create if he isn't, but we'll see. Amen Thompson may also get some more point guard responsibilities to see if he can grow into that in the coming seasons. And then I'm really hoping that Alperen Sengun can be a more efficient scorer and also operate as a post hub to give this team some real offensive versatility. But outside of those concerns, this team is crazy. Kevin Durant, Amen Thompson, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., they added Dorian Finney-Smith as well, an elite 3-and-D wing, Steven Adams, Clint Capella. This team is going to be gigantic, and a lot of the best teams in the West, that being Denver, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, play like that, are. So it's going to be needed. In my number 5 spot, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves. This team hasn't changed much, and my main question will be, can Anthony Edwards take another leap? Can he be better as an intermediate shot maker and playmaker? And also, will his three-point shooting continue to be as good as it was last season? Because he suddenly exploded into a near 10 attempts per game on 40% three-point shooter, and that really patched up a lot of the offensive holes that were left in the wake of Karl Anthony Towns. Now, this team isn't as deep as the teams above it, but they do have guys who thrive in big moments like Ant, Nas, DiVincenzo, J-Mac, and good bench pieces like Jalen Clark and Terrence Shannon Jr. I'm not really looking towards their first-round pick this year or anybody else they picked up over the summer to really contribute in a meaningful way. They did lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker, which is a pretty big hit to their collective ball handling ability, but I'm wondering if J-Mac can take on more of those responsibilities. I think they have a strong starting 5 and 2 to 3 bench guys I trust for the playoffs, that being Naz Reid, DiVincenzo, maybe Jalen Clark, or a year 2 Rob Dillingham. With that said, I do wonder if Mike Conley will continue to regress as much as he did between 2 seasons ago and last season. He lost a lot of mobility, and defense just can't handle that super high level playoff ball pressure the same way, which is even more reason why things are going to be on Anthony Edwards. Overall, I think this team is going to be a top 6 seed in the regular season and probably a second round or maybe even conference finals exit. In my number 6 spot, I have the only other Eastern Conference team on this list, that being the New York Knicks. I don't think this is the best team in the East on paper, but I do feel higher on them than a lot of others, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to play small bean with the New York Knicks. Let's get this out of the way. They're going to be a mediocre defense that's particularly vulnerable against teams that can turn up the pace and get out in transition. They'll probably end up being middle of the pack to even fringe top 10 in the regular season just off of pure talent and depth. That being said, this is a team that's been at the top of the conference for a couple of years straight now and have either dealt with injuries or a lack of depth come playoff time, and there's good reason to believe it can be a lot better. The Knicks have added some collective ball handling on offense with Malcolm Brogdon and Jordan Clarkson, and then there's more front court depth with Gershon Yabusele, Trey Jemison, Ariel Hukporti, and these guys aren't world beaters. I'm not trying to convince you of that, but they can ease the burden on Karl Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson, OG Anunoby even to an extent, and then hopefully this team can play closer to its ceiling more often. That's something I felt they very seldomly did last season due to a multitude of reasons, that being exhaustion, making the new identity with Karl Anthony Towns work, which another thing is this is year 2 for him, a full training camp and offseason integrated with this team. And speaking of identity changes, I am excited at the prospect of Mike Brown tapping into more of this offense's potential. I think the Knicks will have a fairly advantageous path to the conference finals, barring them matching up against the Celtics or Pacers team that's suddenly healthy in time for the playoffs. Which, that being said, Jason Tatum is moving a little too well for a dude that tore his Achilles 4.5 months ago. But even if he and Tyrese Halliburton were able to return, I don't think it would ultimately change the top 2 in the East this season, but it could make their path towards meeting in the conference finals a bit more interesting. At number 7, I have the Los Angeles Clippers. This is where I need to note that this list is fully assuming health, and I'm also not factoring in the whole Steve Ballmer aspiration, paying Kawhi under the table to circumvent the salary cap situation currently going on, and the possibility of Kawhi being suspended, fined, or anything that would affect this immediate season. So with that aside, I really like this team. They have great depth, run legitimately 9 to 10 deep. They added Brook Lopez, John Collins, Chris Paul has returned. They did lose Norman Powell this offseason, but gained Bradley Beal back in turn, so I think he'll thrive in this role. It's one thing if you're asking Bradley Beal to be part of a big three on a super shallow team and act as almost an engine, but if you just need him to be an offensive spark piece for a team like the Clippers, I think he'll be even better than Norman Powell. And this was a very solid team last season. They dealt with Kawhi only playing 37 games and still were the 5th seed, won 50 games, and took Denver to 7 in round 1. And then there's James Harden, who, for better and for worse, is James Harden at this point, but with all of his detractions aside, I think he's a pretty incredible offensive engine and is going to deliver this team a pretty damn high floor. And in general, this team has a really high floor, especially for the regular season. But with that said, I do find it hard to imagine they nab a top seed or could make it further than a first, maybe second round series. And in my number 8 spot, I have the Los Angeles Lakers. This team's ceiling is fully dependent on what version of Luka we get. If it's the 2023-24 version of him, this team could be really good. That ceiling is as one of the best offenses in the league and maybe an average to slightly above average defense if Ayton works out, if LeBron can exert himself more on that end, if Marcus Smart makes an impact in his minutes, and generally if the rest of the dudes buy in. I'm really looking at guys like Rui Hachimura and Jake LaRavia. I do think LeBron is a great number 2 at this point in his career, but how reliable will he be during the regular season is definitely going to be a question. He's already going to miss the first couple of weeks of the season with sciatica, which, side note, such an old head thing to have. Realistically, this team is probably fine in the regular season and is a lower seeded playoff team that gets a bad matchup in the first round, maybe the second round. This team does have a chance to raise themselves into fringe contention status, though, through a midseason trade. I'm looking at Austin Reeves in that department. And don't get me wrong, I really like Austin Reeves, but he's a little redundant with Luka on the team now, and the Lakers will never be able to survive deep in the playoffs with Luka and Reeves as their backcourt. It's just too flimsy defensively. If they could flip him into a dynamic third star, I think the ceiling of this team gets even higher. In my number 9 spot, I have the Golden State Warriors. I'll be honest, I don't love this team. I think the offense is still super limited for an upper echelon playoff team, and they're relying on Steph Curry a lot regardless of Jimmy Butler's addition. That being said, a full season with Jimmy is a good thing, and I like the Al Horford addition a lot. There's of course the fear of a drastic fall off at any moment for a 40-year-old player like Horford, but I still think he moves pretty damn well, and the lineups of Jimmy, Horford, and Dre are going to be pretty killer defensively. I do think this team is a top 5 to 10 defense, and it's also relatively deep. I like DeAnthony Melton, Brandon Podziemski, Buddy Hield sometimes, Moses Moody, and this is all without mentioning Jonathan Kuminga, who I do not like. The contract negotiation stalemate between him and the Warriors finally concluded in them signing him to some half-assed 2-year deal that they have an option for in the second year. They'll probably look to move off of him as soon as possible, but I'm just not sure what the market is for him. I really don't like the way that guy plays. It is important to note, though, that this team really isn't built for the regular season. Steph is bound to miss a few games, the same with Draymond, and then even more so with guys like Jimmy and Horford. Likely, they're going to be a lower-seeded playoff team, but I do believe in Steph and the veteran poise of this group when it gets down to it in the playoffs. But with all that said, I think it's a first, maybe second-round exit team in my opinion. And then in my number 10 spot, rounding out my contender rankings for the 2025-26 season, I have the Dallas Mavericks. I think the idealized version of this team could be much higher, maybe even top 5 to 6 contenders in the league, but I'm just not betting on all of that coming together. The reason is, frankly, this team is relying on a 33-year-old Kyrie Irving who tore his ACL in March to be back in time for the playoffs and fully ready to go. A rookie, albeit a unique rookie in Cooper Flagg, who has a lot of connective skills that'll translate on day one, but a rookie nonetheless. And then Anthony Davis, it's just it's Anthony Davis. He's fantastic, but he's also probably going to miss a chunk of time. He's also probably not going to produce reliably on a game-to-game basis. This team is deep as hell, though. There are legit 11 guys that I like throughout the regular season and in reduced roles for the playoffs. I think D'Angelo Russell was a really smart addition after the Kyrie Irving injury. D'Lo has his problems, and if that's your starting point guard in a postseason rut-row, but he's going to do a lot to patch that point guard role during the regular season. One of my main hangups with this team is I'm just not sure how much I trust that Cooper Flagg is going to be a star consistently out the gate. And don't get me wrong, I think this guy is going to be good immediately, a winning player, no doubt. But he's getting thrown into the fire and is going to have a lot more on-ball responsibilities this season than he would have if he had Kyrie Irving. And I think that'll be great for him in the long term, but the result of that this season will probably be pretty hit or miss with flashes of the player he'll become, which will be awesome. But if there's no Kyrie, can he be your second best offensive player in a playoff series as a rookie? Honestly, maybe. I don't know. He's looked pretty damn good in the preseason. Maybe he's just goated like that. But regardless, I think even if he does turn out to be really good and exceed expectations as a rookie, he'll probably need till at least like December or January to start getting comfortable consistently. Maybe he averages 18-8 with 3 stocks through the second half of the season, but I don't know. I'm just a little hesitant to overly rely on rookies and assume they can just deliver everything that's promised right out the gate. I do think the Mavs are going to be a pretty good regular season team. All that depth that I mentioned and also the defensive talent of this team is just absurd. It's a top 5 unit in the league on that end, no doubt. So I do see them making the playoffs and being a really, really tough out for another team. And maybe things could change if Kyrie comes back and he looks great, but that is where I have them for now. I'd be surprised if they went beyond that this season. All right, that's going to do it for my preseason contender rankings. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. If you agree or disagree, call me an idiot. I'm really open to it all. Check me out on Twitter and Medium. Also, TikTok. I haven't posted there in a while, but I'll probably get back into doing that. I don't know. Just all the short form stuff on smaller topics I'm not making videos on. Anyways, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. See you in the next one.